Whew. It seems like everybody's collaborating. Everybody. And of course, you guys know, I want to try to get on top of this, that the Honda and Nissan talks merging, whatever you want to call it, has been on the books. I'm going to try to say this as objectively as possible. I don't think it's a good idea. Now, granted, I see the benefit. I see where they're trying to go. I see how they're trying to get objectives achieved and appease shareholders and keep the companies afloat. I don't think it's a good idea. What's up, guys? My name is Chris, and welcome to The Breakdown, where we talk about everything cars, news, and reviews. If you're new to the channel, of course, welcome, and if you are not, welcome back. So if you guys haven't been keeping up, Nissan has been in trouble. I think there's been enough journalism and coverage around it, and we all know that Nissan is struggling, okay? And it's not funny, but it's funny because we make so much fun of Nissan, and I think had we understood that they were in dire straits, it might not be as funny, because a lot of people surprisingly do like Nissan, and there's nothing wrong with that. They brought us a lot of great stuff over the last 25, 35, 45 years. But Nissan's troubles extend far beyond what we believe to have happened, and I'm here to tell you that I don't think it's a good idea for different reasons than the obvious, and it's not because I just want them to be separate, but because it doesn't quite fix the problem. And in this video, we'll be talking about that. So with that being said, stick around and stay tuned, because you are now watching The Breakdown. Now, I have always been a distant admirer of Nissan, especially in their early days, roughly around 1990, 2000-ish. And Nissan first entered into the States around 1966, and they became surprisingly the dominant brand under the Datsun brand in the 1970s next to Toyota, and they were neck and neck. And Honda, surprisingly, was like third place before the CVCC debuted, and they started taking up the space of the Japanese big three. And that's how we got them formulated, particularly after the gas crisis of 1973 and the Clean Air Act of 1970. Fast forward into the 1980s, and Nissan is trying to keep up with Toyota, because Toyota's beating everybody's ass, because the Corolla is one of the best-selling cars in the world. And of course, between the big three of the East and the big three of the West, there was this waging war against American consumers, and there was also some struggles with the yen over in Japan, but the devaluation of it allowed for Japanese manufacturers to keep their costs low, which allowed them to sell better in the United States. And once the valuation of the yen increased, that also adjusted the prices for the Japanese cars in the States. The United States is a big market next to China and next to some spots in Europe as well as Australia, but primarily is between China and the United States. Now, between Nissan and Honda, they've taken very different paths between the 80s up until now. For Nissan, for the 80s, it was clicking down, babes.
You're clicking, but you're clicking down.
And particularly because they didn't really have enough product to be able to compete with the likes of Toyota. And Honda did a lot more investing in American manufacturing alongside the Toyota manufacturing side of things. And so much so that Toyota got their foot in with General Motors to be able to create the NUMMI plant, which was over in Fremont, California. And I've actually talked about that in my Pontiac Vibe video, which is expected to come up soon. But the thing is that Nissan, unlike Honda and Toyota, were not really able to put themselves in the American market and invest more so in American manufacturing. And the thing is that Nissan has been really trying to find their footing. And I have talked about this on multiple videos around Nissan, Carlos Ghosn, Renault, and the culture of Nissan, and how all of that translates into the success in sales of Nissans in the early 2000s. Now, granted, Honda was still trying to work out some weeds. They were not exactly adapting, but what they did have was the marker of reliability and fun, whereas Toyota had reliability almost exclusively, and Nissan focused their efforts more so on sporty, fun performance. They were reliable enough, but I would think between them and Mazda, they really struggled. And Mazda was more so owned by Ford at the time, so it was not quite the same Japanese essence. And Mitsubishi is also a part of this story, because towards the mid to late 90s, they found themselves in the hands of the Mitsubishi Renault alliance, along with Dodge and Chrysler. So everybody has been culminating and trying to get their shit together, because it is hard as a car company to continuously produce hits. Between Honda and Nissan for the last 20 years, they have been on two very different paths. But the path that unites the both of them is that the 2008 housing crisis happened, and both Japanese manufacturing companies, and even to some degree Toyota, with some other things that have gone on, have not exactly been doing well. So fast forward into the other week, and pretty much they've been in talks of merging. Now, Nissan in their path have struggled to keep things going, especially since the departure of Carlos Ghosn, and the company just could not get it right. Turnaround. And it's funny because around 2018 to 2020, there's only a 2-year period of peace because the pandemic obviously happened in 2020, and that affects almost every car company in a delayed effect. And I don't know if that would be the case today, but now more and more car companies are starting to struggle. So given all of that, I wanted to give some breakdown of why I don't think it's a great idea. So for context, they have not officially merged or officially decided to merge. They are simply in talks of it. And Nissan has been rumored to been only extending up until the next 24 months for survival before they have to file for bankruptcy. The reality is this, is that both Honda and Nissan are in need of support in different ways. Honda is struggling to keep production at optimal efficiency without losing money, while simultaneously trying to transition into the EV space, as many Japanese car makers don't really believe in the EV movement, but they'll adjust. And EVs, for all intents and purposes, are very expensive to produce. Now, Nissan, on the other hand, needs a different kind of help because they have struggled and relied off heavy dealer incentives. They've relied off questionable financing for some type of consumer borrowers. They have also depended heavily on rental fleet and rental cars from dealers and rental car companies to kind of push out the volume sales of which they do, because that's just been a thing. Even learning about Ford with the Taurus, that's just been always a thing. And the Nissan side of things has been really challenging because even though they offer a decent product, the CVTs have given them quite a bad reputation. Even so much so in terms of what Kia has been able to do within the last 10 years and even outpace their level of quality and reputation. And I don't necessarily care for Kia or Hyundai, but I also understand that they know what they're doing. They're doing a really good job in terms of marketing and sales. But Nissan, unfortunately, has not really given anything inspiring, especially once they moved more to a SUV-based company like many of them have. The Rogue has been their bestseller since about 2016, and the Altima has been slowly dying. The Maxima died a long time ago, and the Sentra is really the only viable candidate because of its lower price. Even the Versa has lost its luster as many people have moved away from smaller micro subcompact cars into just regular compact or compact SUVs. But Honda has been in talks of working with Nissan in terms of mergers for the sake of consolidation, allocation of resources, the sake of network for parts and everything else. And they've been selling comparable numbers. I believe Honda has sold slightly less than Nissan, or it's roughly about 3.5 million that they've been hovering around. But the idea is that Honda is really struggling to figure out how they're going to move into the EV space because, as we all know, everybody is trying to avoid the cost of battery manufacturing, and they're also going to take a hit around parts because there's less moving parts on the electrical side, so there's less for parts and service to do. Now, granted, this will all impact them very later because even after 15 years, a lot of these car companies still supply parts for particular models. So I don't necessarily see that being an immediate issue, but in terms of cost and production and trying to get it at the right sales point for consumers to buy, it's going to be really difficult. But all of those things does not make it a good decision. Now, the reason why I don't think it's a good decision is because we have seen many car companies do this and it blow up. See Daimler Chrysler. But The thing is that these partnerships happen as a result of A, hemorrhaging money, B, poor leadership in some capacity, as well as cultural issues and decentralization of manufacturing, design, and sales and service. And that just creates a whirlwind of issues when you combine forces in many other spaces. We've even seen that with Stellantis and the direction that Carlos Tavares went, and we saw how that ended. While I understand Honda trying to come in and save their Japanese brother, because it is important that they preserve that legacy for their country, their brand, very important. And it would be beneficial for a Japanese company or some type of Japanese owned company to come in and take over Nissan, because if an American company comes in, then you lose the essence of that Japanese manufacturing. Now, I ain't gonna hold y'all. The thing to remember is that Nissan has always had these problems ever since the 80s. And they've always had a cultural issue, and they've always had a problem producing really good products that people want to buy. And I'm going to say this with the utmost respect. I think I said that wrong. The utmost respect. Honda's culture does not align with Nissan's culture, and this in turn would only really benefit Nissan. Honda doesn't really need Nissan in that regard, but I can see where they would benefit, especially considering that Nissan has been doing the EV thing a lot longer, particularly with the Leaf and the Aria, and they've already got a lot more EV products out there. But the manufacturing, the cultural differences does not really make it a viable solution to come in and swoop and save Nissan. And I'm gonna be honest with you, it probably could devalue the Honda brand. People hail them as a premium, whereas Nissan is almost at a discount, so they're almost at an impasse, if you will. But I'm going to say this much: if they in fact decide to merge, I see the reason why. I just don't necessarily think it's a good idea. Now, maybe I could be wrong, but I don't think it's a good idea. But if they in fact do, we may see some very different products from Honda. We may see some very different products from Nissan, and it will be very interesting to see what we would see out of the outcome. And it could very well be a very fruitful relationship, but giving both of their paths, I don't necessarily see that. But with that being said, you guys leave me a comment below and let me know what you think about Nissan and Honda becoming a thing. I mean, that's where we at. And with that being said, until the next video, I will see you guys later.